My name is Eleanor Whitlock, and the message from my mother-in-law appeared on my phone at exactly 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor, we really think you should visit more often. Family is important. I stared at those words, coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips. In the 5 years since I'd married Calvin, his family had treated me with icy politeness at best and open disdain at worst. His mother, Adelaide, never missed an opportunity to mention how Calvin could have married someone from a better background. His father spoke to me in clipped sentences, like I was wasting his valuable time. And now suddenly they wanted me to visit more often? Something felt wrong. The message was too friendly, too insistent. I set down my phone and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe they were genuinely trying to improve our relationship. But my instincts, honed from years of building my woodworking business from nothing, were screaming that this invitation wasn't what it seemed. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I focused on packing for my upcoming trip. In 2 days, I'd be flying across the country for a week-long woodwork expo, showcasing my custom furniture designs. It was the biggest opportunity of my career. I couldn't let Adelaide's suspicious friendliness distract me from that. The morning I left for the expo, Calvin drove me to the airport. He was unusually quiet during the drive, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. "You okay?" I asked, studying his profile. "Fine," he said quickly. "Too quickly. Just going to miss you, that's all. A whole week is a long time." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'll call you every night. And it's for the business. You know how important this is." He nodded but didn't look at me. "Yeah, of course. Go make us proud." Something in his tone felt off, but I dismissed it as pre-trip anxiety. We'd been married for 5 years, and he'd always supported my woodworking career. Or at least, I thought he had. At the airport, he kissed me goodbye, his lips cold against mine. "Have a safe trip," he said, already turning back toward the car before I'd even grabbed my luggage. I watched him drive away, that uneasy feeling returning. But I shook it off and headed toward security. I had a business to run and a reputation to build. Whatever was bothering Calvin, we could discuss it when I returned. The flight was smooth, the hotel was nice, and by that evening I was setting up my booth at the expo center. My custom furniture pieces drew admiring looks from other vendors. This was going to be a successful week. I could feel it. I had no idea that back home, my absence had triggered a plan that had been months in the making. On the second night of the expo, my phone buzzed with an alert I'd never seen before. It was from my home security system, the sophisticated setup I'd installed 6 months ago after a string of burglaries in nearby neighborhoods. Motion detected at front entrance. Motion detected at side door. Motion detected in backyard. 3 alerts within 5 minutes. My heart started racing. I opened the security app and checked the camera feeds. The timestamp showed the activity was happening right now, in real time. But the cameras had been disabled. Every single one. The feeds showed black screens with error messages, camera offline. Someone had deliberately disconnected my security cameras. But they hadn't known about the backup system I'd installed separately, a system that sent me alerts even when the main cameras were disabled. I immediately called Calvin. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice slightly breathless. "Hey, babe. How's the expo?" "Calvin, someone's at the house. Multiple security alerts just went off. The cameras are disabled. What's going on?" There was a pause, just a fraction too long. "Oh, that. Don't worry about it. My parents stopped by to check on the place. You know, make sure everything's okay while you're gone." "Your parents disabled my security cameras. They probably accidentally unplugged something. You know how they are with technology. It's fine, Eleanor. Really." But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. The next morning, I received a call from Mrs. Parker, my elderly neighbor who lived 3 houses down. She'd been like a grandmother to me since I'd moved to the property, always bringing over homemade cookies and keeping an eye on things. "Eleanor, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you," she said, her voice worried. But I think you should know what's happening at your house. My stomach dropped. What is it, Mrs. Parker? Your in-laws have been there for 2 days now. Not just visiting, they've brought contractors. Men with measuring equipment, trucks with building supplies. They're taking measurements all around your property, marking things with stakes and string. It looks like they're planning construction. I felt cold all over. Construction. What kind of construction? I'm not sure, dear. But they've been walking around like they own the place. Your mother-in-law was pointing at different areas, talking about where to put things. And the contractors have been digging holes in your backyard. I thanked Mrs. Parker and hung up, my hands shaking. This wasn't a simple family visit. This was something else entirely. Something planned and deliberate. I tried calling Calvin again. This time he answered immediately, his tone defensive before I'd even said anything. Before you get upset, you need to understand, my family is just trying to help. Help with what, Calvin? Mrs. Parker says there are contractors at our house, taking measurements, digging holes. They're improving the property for you. For us. You should be grateful. Grateful? For unauthorized construction on my property? Calvin kept insisting his family was just helping every time I called. His explanations made less sense each time. They want to add a guest house for when they visit. They're expanding the garage so you'll have more workshop space. They're putting in a pool because they know you've always wanted one. I had never wanted a pool. I'd never mentioned wanting more workshop space. And I definitely didn't want a guest house specifically for his parents. Something was very wrong. That night, unable to focus on the expo, I returned to my hotel room early and opened my laptop. I navigated to a secure cloud storage folder that no one knew existed. Inside was a PDF file I'd scanned and saved years ago, the original property deed. The deed with my name on it. My maiden name. Eleanor Hartley. I'd purchased this property 8 years ago, 3 years before I even met Calvin. I'd used inheritance money from my grandfather, money I'd saved carefully and invested wisely. The house had been a foreclosure, a complete mess that I'd spent 2 years renovating with my own hands. I'd rebuilt floors, replaced windows, redesigned the entire layout. By the time I'd finished, it was worth 5 times what I'd paid for it. When Calvin and I got married 5 years ago, I'd kept the property in my name. We'd signed a prenuptial agreement at my lawyer's insistence, a document that clearly stated the house and land was solely mine. Calvin had waived all rights to the property. He'd signed the papers without complaint, saying he understood it was mine and he respected that. I'd kept this information private, not because I didn't trust him, but because I'd learned early in life that financial independence was precious and should be protected. I sat in that hotel room, staring at the deed on my laptop screen. The property address was clearly listed. The purchase date, 8 years ago. The buyer's name, Eleanor Hartley. Not Eleanor Whitlock. The name I'd used before marriage, before Calvin, before his family had entered my life. I opened another file, our prenuptial agreement. The language was crystal clear. The property located at 847 Riverside Road, including all structures and land, shall remain the sole property of Eleanor Hartley, hereafter referred to as Party A Calvin Whitlock, hereafter referred to as Party B, waives all present and future claims to said property. Calvin had signed on the designated line. His signature was right there, witnessed and notarized. He'd agreed that the house was mine and would always be mine, regardless of our marriage status. Why, then, were his parents treating it like family property? Why were contractors there, planning construction as if they had any authority? I pulled up another document, one I'd obtained 6 months ago when I'd purchased additional property near our house. It was a land investment, 50 acres of farmland adjacent to my original lot. I'd bought it quietly through an LLC, planning to eventually expand my woodworking business with a proper manufacturing facility. The farmland came with an existing tenant, someone who'd been renting it for agricultural purposes for years. I scrolled to the tenant information section and stopped cold. The renter's name, Whitlock Family Trust. Adelaide and Robert Whitlock. My in-laws had been renting farmland from me for 6 months and didn't even know it. The LLC name didn't include my name anywhere. It was registered as Hartley Holdings, my maiden name company. They'd been writing rent checks to a property management company that forwarded the money to my business account. They had no idea their daughter-in-law was their landlord. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. My in-laws thought they had some claim to my property. They were planning construction, unauthorized, uninvited construction. And Calvin was helping them. But why? What did they hope to gain? My phone buzzed with a text message. From Calvin. Except the message clearly wasn't meant for me. Once the transfer is signed, she can't say anything. Mom says the lawyer confirmed it. I stared at those words, reading them over and over. Transfer. What transfer? I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to any property transfers. My fingers flew across my phone keyboard. What transfer? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Appeared again. Calvin was panicking, realizing his mistake. Wrong person. Sorry. That was meant for my mom. What transfer, Calvin? I typed again, my jaw clenched. No response. He'd stopped replying entirely. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail again. He'd turned off his phone. I sat there in my hotel room, rage and betrayal burning through my chest. My husband had just accidentally revealed that he and his family were planning to make me sign some kind of property transfer. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. They were going to try to steal my house. The house I'd bought before I ever met them. The house I'd rebuilt with my own hands. The house that was legally, completely, solely mine. Well, I had news for them. This wasn't going to go the way they planned. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours on my laptop, reviewing documents and making phone calls. At 6 in the morning, I called my lawyer, Charles Merritt. He'd handled my property purchase 8 years ago and had drafted my prenuptial agreement. Charles, I need you to pull every document related to my property. The original deed, the prenup, the LLC paperwork for the farmland purchase. Everything. Eleanor, is everything all right? No. My in-laws are trying to steal my property. I need you to meet me at my house tomorrow afternoon. Can you do that? Of course. What time? 2 o'clock. And Charles, bring copies of everything. Official, notarized copies. After hanging up with Charles, I booked the earliest flight home I could find. It meant abandoning the last 3 days of the expo, losing potential business opportunities. But this was more important. My home was under attack. By noon, I was at the airport. By 5 o'clock that evening, I was landing back in my home state. I didn't tell Calvin I was coming home early. I didn't warn anyone. I rented a car at the airport and drove straight to my property, my heart pounding the entire way. What would I find when I got there? What had they done to my house in the 3 days I'd been gone? As I turned onto my street, I could see my house in the distance. And my blood ran cold at what I saw. My driveway was completely blocked. A massive construction dumpster sat right in the middle of it, making it impossible to pull in. Contractor trucks lined the street. And in my backyard, I could see people moving around, setting up equipment. I parked on the street and approached my front door. My key didn't work. They had changed my locks. On my own house. I stood there, key in hand, staring at the new lock that had replaced the one I'd installed myself 3 years ago. Behind me, I heard voices. Laughter. I walked around to the backyard, my footsteps quiet on the grass. What I saw made my vision go red. My in-laws, Adelaide and Robert, were hosting some kind of outdoor meeting. A folding table had been set up with blueprints spread across it. 3 contractors stood around them, pointing at the plans and discussing measurements. Adelaide was holding a glass of wine, gesturing grandly at my property like she owned it. Calvin stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. Not defending me. Not stopping this. Just standing there, complicit. I think the guest house should go right here, Adelaide was saying, pointing to a spot near my workshop. And we'll extend the main house this direction. Really open up the space. Make it proper. Proper, I said loudly, stepping into the circle. Everyone turned to stare at me. Adelaide's face registered surprise, then annoyance. Calvin went pale. Eleanor, he stammered. You're not supposed to be back until when? Until you'd stolen my property? Until you'd forged my signature on whatever transfer document you're planning. Adelaide recovered quickly, her face shifting into false warmth. Eleanor, darling, you misunderstand. We're improving the place. For the family. Adelaide stepped forward, still holding her wine glass, her smile dripping with fake sweetness. We knew you'd be resistant to change, so we decided to surprise you. Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. You changed my locks. You brought contractors onto my property without permission. You're planning construction I never authorized. Tell me how any of that is wonderful. Robert, Calvin's father, cleared his throat. Eleanor, let's be reasonable. This property is too much for you to handle alone. We're family. It makes sense to combine resources, make improvements that benefit everyone. Benefit everyone? Or benefit you? Adelaide waved her hand dismissively. You're being dramatic. Calvin told us you'd react this way. Always so protective of your little house. My house, I said firmly. That I bought. That I own. That has nothing to do with any of you. Actually, Adelaide said, reaching into her expensive handbag, we've taken care of the legal details. She pulled out a folder and handed it to me with a triumphant smile. Inside were documents, official-looking papers with legal language and signature lines. I scanned the first page, my hands shaking with rage. It was a property transfer agreement. According to these papers, I was signing over 50% ownership of my house and land to the Whitlock Family Trust. The signature line at the bottom had my name typed next to it, Eleanor Whitlock. But the signature itself was blank. They hadn't forged it yet. These papers, Adelaide said smugly, will make everything official. Once you sign, the property becomes family property. We can all make decisions together. Isn't that better than you struggling alone? I looked at Calvin. Did you know about this? He couldn't meet my eyes. Mom thought it would be easier if you tricked me into signing away my house. Adelaide's smile never wavered. It's not trickery, Eleanor. It's family planning. And honestly, you should be grateful. We're investing our money into improvements that will increase the property value. You benefit from that. I benefit from being robbed. I laughed, the sound bitter and cold. These documents are fake. They have no legal standing. I never agreed to any of this. They're perfectly legitimate, Robert said, his voice stern. We had our lawyer draft them. Once you sign, the transfer is binding. Your lawyer? I pulled out my phone. That's interesting. Because my lawyer is going to have some thoughts about this. Adelaide's confidence faltered slightly. Your lawyer? Yes. Charles Merritt. He handled my property purchase 8 years ago. He also drafted my prenuptial agreement. The one where Calvin waived all rights to this property. Remember that, Calvin? My husband flinched. The contractors were looking uncomfortable now, stepping back from the table. They were starting to realize they'd been brought into something messy. Let me make this very clear, I said, looking at each person around that table. This property is mine. Solely, completely, legally mine. I bought it before I met Calvin. It's in my maiden name. And I have the deed to prove it. Adelaide laughed, but it sounded forced. Your maiden name? Don't be ridiculous. You're married now. What's yours is the family's. Actually, I said slowly, what's mine is mine. But you know what's funny? I'm not just the owner of this property. I pulled up my phone, opening the LLC documents I'd saved there. I'm also the owner of Hartley Holdings, the company that owns the farmland you've been renting for the past 6 months. The farmland you use for your agricultural business. The colour drained from Adelaide's face. What? You've been writing rent checks to my company, Adelaide. I'm your landlord. Have been since I bought that property 6 months ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Adelaide's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the patio stones. Robert's face went from pale to red. Calvin looked like he might be sick. That's impossible, Adelaide whispered. The farmland belongs to Hartley Holdings, I finished. My company. My maiden name. The same name on this property's deed. I've been your landlord for 6 months, and you never bothered to check who actually owned the land you were renting. I turned to the contractors. Gentlemen, I'm the legal property owner. I never authorized any of this work. I suggest you pack up and leave before I call the police for trespassing. They didn't need to be told twice. Within minutes, they were loading equipment back into their trucks, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Adelaide found her voice again, shrill and desperate. This is ridiculous. Calvin, tell her she's being unreasonable. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone again and held it up so everyone could see. Funny thing about smartphones. They record everything. Every word you just said about tricking me into signing transfer documents. About how you planned this while I was out of town. About forging documents to steal my property. I recorded all of it. Adelaide's face went from red to grey. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said coldly. I have video evidence of you admitting to fraud. Of you trespassing. Of you planning to forge legal documents. Want to test how reasonable I'm feeling right now. Robert grabbed Adelaide's arm. We should go. No, Adelaide snapped. This is our son's house too. He has rights. Actually, I said, pulling up the prenup on my phone, he doesn't. He signed away those rights 5 years ago. Right here. See his signature. He agreed this property would always be solely mine. I looked at Calvin. Didn't you tell them about the prenup? Calvin's silence was answer enough. He hadn't told them. He'd let them believe he had some claim to my property, let them plan this entire scheme, without ever mentioning that he'd legally waived all rights to it years ago. Calvin. Adelaide's voice was sharp. What is she talking about? He swallowed hard. We signed a prenup. Before the wedding. The property was always hers. And you didn't think to mention this. Robert's voice was ice cold. We've spent months planning this expansion. We've already paid contractors' deposits. We've invested thousands of dollars. And you knew the whole time it was pointless. I thought maybe. Calvin trailed off miserably. Maybe what? I demanded. Maybe you could trick me into signing it over anyway. Maybe you could all gang up on me and pressure me into giving up the house I bought with my grandfather's inheritance. The house I spent 2 years rebuilding with my own hands. Adelaide's face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little. Careful, I warned. You're still being recorded. She stopped herself, but I could see the fury in her eyes. This wasn't over for her. She wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. You need to leave, I said firmly. All of you. Get off my property right now. Calvin lives here, Adelaide protested. He has rights as a tenant. Does he? I looked at my husband. Calvin, do you want to stay here? With me? After this? He couldn't meet my eyes. That was answer enough. Pack a bag, I told him. You can stay with your parents tonight. We'll figure out the rest later. Eleanor, please, he started. We can talk about this. I didn't mean, yes, you did, I interrupted. You absolutely meant this. You've been planning it for who knows how long. So no, we can't talk about it. Not right now. Just leave. The next afternoon, Charles Merritt arrived at exactly 2 o'clock as planned. He stepped out of his car carrying a thick leather briefcase, his expression serious and professional. Eleanor, he said, shaking my hand. I've reviewed everything you sent me. This is quite a situation. That's putting it mildly. We sat at my dining room table, the table I'd built myself from reclaimed wood 3 years ago. Charles opened his briefcase and began pulling out documents. Let's start with the basics, he said, spreading papers across the table. This is your original property deed, recorded 8 years ago. Buyer, Eleanor Hartley. No other names. No co-owners. Just you. He placed another document beside it. This is your prenuptial agreement. Signed by both you and Calvin Whitlock 5 years ago. In it, Calvin explicitly waives all current and future claims to the property at 847 Riverside Road. It's ironclad. More documents followed. These are the LLC papers for Hartley Holdings. You purchased 50 acres of farmland adjacent to this property 6 months ago. The sellers were the Morrison family, who'd owned it for generations. The current tenants, paying monthly rent, are listed as the Whitlock Family Trust. Charles looked up at me, something like admiration in his eyes. You've been their landlord for 6 months, and they never knew. I kept my maiden name on the LLC specifically to keep my business separate from my personal life, I explained. I never imagined it would become relevant like this. Well, it's relevant now, Charles said. He pulled out the fake transfer documents Adelaide had tried to make me sign. These, on the other hand, are worthless. They're not notarized, they're not witnessed properly, and most importantly, you never signed them. If they had tried to forge your signature, it would have been criminal fraud. Charles continued laying out documents, building a case that was becoming overwhelming in its thoroughness. Now, here's where it gets interesting, he said, pulling out another file. When you called me yesterday, I did some digging into the Whitlock Family Trust. Specifically, their rental agreement for the farmland. He opened the file, showing me a rental contract. Their lease is month to month, with a clause that allows the landlord, that's you, to terminate with 30 days notice for any violation of property terms. What kind of violations? I asked. Unauthorized subletting, unpaid rent, or, he pointed to a specific paragraph, any action by the tenant that could be construed as hostile toward the landlord's interests. I leaned forward, reading the clause carefully. They tried to steal my property. That definitely seems hostile. Exactly. Charles smiled. You have legal grounds to terminate their lease immediately. They'd have 30 days to remove all their equipment and vacate the land. The weight of this realization settled over me. Not only did I own my house free and clear, not only did I have proof of their attempted fraud, but I also controlled the farmland their entire agricultural business depended on. They tried to overpower me, and instead, I held all the cards. There's more, Charles said. The construction they attempted to start on your property, the holes they dug, the measurements they took, the stakes they placed, all of that was done without permits. Without your authorization as the property owner. I checked with the county this morning. No permits were filed. That's illegal construction. What does that mean? It means they're liable for fines. It means any damage they cause to your property, they're responsible for repairing. And it means if you wanted to pursue it, you could file charges for trespassing, property damage, and attempted fraud. I sat back, overwhelmed. I don't want to destroy them, Charles. I just want them to leave me alone. Charles nodded understandingly. That's your choice to make. But you should know the full extent of your legal position before you decide how to proceed. He pulled out one final document. This is a preliminary estimate I had drawn up this morning. If you were to pursue full legal action, trespassing charges, property damage claims, fraud allegations, breach of tenant agreements, the Whitlock family would be looking at somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 in fines, fees, and restitution. The number staggered me. $70,000. Their entire scheme could cost them everything. However, Charles continued, you also have the option of handling this quietly. Terminate their farmland lease. Establish clear boundaries. Make sure they understand the consequences if they ever try anything like this again. Then move on with your life. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Calvin. I almost declined the call, but something made me answer. Eleanor. His voice was strained, desperate. We need to talk. Please. Just give me 5 minutes. Charles is here, I said. My lawyer. If you want to talk, you can talk to both of us. There was a pause. Okay, yes. I'm coming over. He arrived 10 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled. He hesitated at the door, like he wasn't sure if he was still allowed in his own home. Come in, I said, my voice cold. Calvin sat across from Charles and me, his hand shaking slightly. I'm sorry, he began. I know that's not enough, but I'm so sorry. This got way out of hand. Out of hand. I repeated. Calvin, you helped your parents plan to steal my house. That's not getting out of hand. That's betrayal. Calvin's face crumpled. I know it was wrong. But you don't understand the pressure they put on me. My whole life, they've controlled everything. Where I went to school, what job I took, who I dated. And when I married you, someone they didn't approve of because you weren't from their social circle, they never let me forget it. So you let them try to take my house? I demanded. That's how you handled their disapproval. They said if we merged the properties, if we became a real family unit, they'd finally accept you. Accept us. I thought. He trailed off miserably. I thought it would fix everything. By stealing from me. I didn't see it that way. They made it sound like it was just reorganizing assets, making things official. They said it would protect you, protect us, if anything ever happened. Charles spoke up, his voice stern. Calvin, you signed a prenuptial agreement that explicitly stated this property would remain Eleanor's. You understood that 5 years ago. What changed? Calvin looked at his hands. They said the prenup was just a formality. That married couples share everything and the prenup didn't really matter. They said Eleanor would be happy to make it official once she understood the benefits. Benefits? I laughed bitterly. What benefits, Calvin? Letting your mother redesign my house? Letting your father claim ownership of property he never paid for? Exactly what was I supposed to benefit from? I was stupid, he whispered. I let them manipulate me. I should have stood up for you. I should have told them no from the beginning. But I was scared. Scared of what? Scared they'd cut me off. Financially, emotionally, everything. My whole life. Their love has been conditional. If I didn't do what they wanted, they'd freeze me out. And I couldn't handle that. I looked at this man I'd married, this man I'd thought I knew, and saw a stranger. A weak, scared stranger who'd chosen his parents' approval over his wife's trust. Charles cleared his throat. Calvin, I need to be very clear about the legal situation here. Your parents attempted fraud. They brought contractors onto Eleanor's property without permission. They changed her locks without authorization. They tried to coerce her into signing false documents. All of that is criminal. Calvin went even paler. Criminal. Yes. And because you were complicit, you knew about the plan, you helped facilitate it by ensuring Eleanor was out of town, you gave them access to the property, you could be charged as an accessory. Oh my God. Calvin's voice was barely a whisper. However, Charles continued, Eleanor has the option to handle this without pressing charges. But that decision depends on you. And your parents. He pulled out several documents. These are eviction notices for the farmland your parents rent from Eleanor's company. These are estimates for the property damage caused by their unauthorized construction. And this is a restraining order petition that would prevent them from coming within 500 feet of this property. Calvin looked at me, his eyes desperate. Eleanor, please. Don't do this. They're my parents. They made a mistake, but they're still my family. They tried to steal from me, Calvin. They called me ungrateful. They treated my property like it was theirs for the taking. Why should I show them mercy? Because I'm asking you to, he said, tears running down his face now. Please. Give me a chance to fix this. Let me talk to them, make them understand how wrong they were. I'll get them to apologize, to stay away, whatever you want. Just please don't destroy them. I looked at Charles, who gave me a slight nod. The choice was mine. I could pursue full legal action, cost them everything, make them pay for every bit of pain they'd caused. Or I could take the higher road, establish boundaries, and move forward. But I wasn't feeling particularly merciful. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at my backyard. The backyard they'd treated like their personal property. The stakes and string from their construction plans were still visible in the grass. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, turning back to face Calvin. "Your parents have 30 days to vacate the farmland. I'm terminating their lease. Charles will serve them eviction notices tomorrow." Calvin opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. They will pay for all the property damage they caused, the holes they dug, the locks they changed, everything. I'll send them an itemized bill. They have 60 days to pay it in full. Eleanor, and," I continued, my voice hard, "they will sign a legal agreement promising never to contact me, never to step foot on this property, and never to make any claims on anything I own. If they violate that agreement even once, I'll pursue full legal action. Criminal charges, civil suits, everything." I looked directly at Calvin. "As for you, you have a choice to make. You can stay married to me and respect my boundaries, my property, and my decisions. Or you can leave. But if you stay, things change. No more running to your parents about our business. No more letting them influence your decisions. You're either on my side completely, or you're not on my side at all." He was crying openly now. "I want to stay. I want to make this right. I'll do anything." "Then you'll start by calling your parents right now and telling them exactly what's going to happen. No sugarcoating. No begging me to change my mind. You tell them the truth. They attempted fraud, they're losing the farmland, and they're lucky I'm not pressing charges." Calvin pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He dialed his mother's number. She answered immediately. "Calvin, did you talk to her? Is she being reasonable?" Calvin put the phone on speaker so Charles and I could hear. "Mom, you need to listen to me very carefully. Eleanor is terminating your lease on the farmland. You have 30 days to vacate." Adelaide's voice exploded through the phone. "She can't do that. We have rights. We've been renting that land for months." "You've been renting it from her," Calvin said, his voice steady for the first time since this whole mess started. "She owns it through her LLC. She's been your landlord the entire time." Silence. "Then, that's impossible. The property management company works for her company, Hartley Holdings. Her maiden name. The same name on the deed to this house that you tried to steal." "We didn't try to steal anything," Adelaide shrieked. "We were improving family property." "No," Calvin said firmly. "You were trying to take property that belongs solely to Eleanor. Property I have no legal claim to. Property I signed away rights to 5 years ago in our prenuptial agreement. You knew that, Mom. I told you about the prenup when we first got married." Another silence. Longer this time. "You said it was just a formality," Adelaide said, her voice smaller now. "You said it didn't matter because married couples share everything." "I was wrong. And I was wrong to help you plan this. Eleanor has every legal right to press criminal charges against you and Dad for attempted fraud, trespassing, and property damage. She's choosing not to, but only if you follow her terms exactly." "Terms? What terms?" Calvin looked at me. I nodded for him to continue. "You vacate the farmland within 30 days. You pay for all the damage you caused to her property, the holes you dug, the locks you changed, everything. And you sign a legal agreement never to contact her or set foot on her property again." Adelaide's voice turned vicious. "This is extortion. I won't be threatened by some ungrateful little—" "Mom," Calvin interrupted, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Stop. Just stop. You're wrong. You've always been wrong about Eleanor. She built a successful business from nothing. She bought this house years before she met me. She's been financially independent her entire adult life. And instead of respecting that, you tried to take it from her. I'm your mother. How dare you speak to me like You tried to steal from my wife, Calvin said, his voice breaking. You made me complicit in fraud. You put my marriage at risk. You put yourself at risk of criminal charges. And for what? Pride. Control. Because you couldn't stand that Eleanor didn't need your money or your approval. I heard Robert's voice in the background, muffled but urgent. Then Adelaide came back on the line. Her tone shifted. Still angry, but now laced with fear. What exactly does she want us to sign? Charles leaned forward. Mrs. Whitlock, this is Charles Merritt, Eleanor's attorney. I'll be serving you with formal eviction notices tomorrow. You'll also receive a detailed bill for property damages. The legal agreement I mentioned prohibits any contact with Eleanor, any presence on her property, and any future claims to her assets. If you violate these terms, she will pursue full legal action. How much are the damages? Robert's voice now, gruff and worried. Preliminary estimate is between $8,000 and $12,000. That includes lock replacement, land restoration, and compensation for unauthorized property access. That's robbery. Adelaide shrieked. That's consequences, I said, speaking for the first time. You changed my locks without permission. You brought contractors onto my property. You dug holes in my yard. You attempted fraud. $8,000 is getting off easy, Adelaide. The criminal charges alone could cost you $70,000 in fines. The line went quiet. I could hear them whispering urgently to each other. Finally, Robert spoke. We'll sign the agreement. We'll vacate the farmland. But we need 60 days, not 30. We have equipment to move, crops to harvest. 30 days, I said firmly. You should have thought about logistics before you tried to steal my house. 45, Robert countered. We'll pay half the damages up front as good faith. But we need 45 days to move everything properly. I looked at Charles, who shrugged slightly. It was my call. 45 days, I agreed. But the agreement gets signed within 1 week. And if you're even 1 day late vacating, I pursue full legal action. Understood. Understood, Robert said quietly. Adelaide said nothing. Calvin hung up and looked at me with exhausted, hopeful eyes. Thank you for giving them a chance to do this right. Understood, Robert said quietly. Adelaide said nothing. Calvin hung up and looked at me with exhausted, hopeful eyes. Thank you for giving them a chance to do this right. I'm not doing it for them, I said. I'm doing it because I'm better than they are. But Calvin, this doesn't fix us. You still chose them over me. That doesn't go away just because I'm being merciful now. Over the next week, Charles handled all the legal paperwork. The eviction notices were served. The property damage assessment was completed and billed. And the legal agreement, the one prohibiting Adelaide and Robert from ever contacting me or claiming my property, was drafted, notarized, and signed. They signed it without argument, which told me Robert had finally made Adelaide understand how serious the situation was. The bill for damages came to $10,200. They paid it in full within 3 days. $5,000 upfront as promised, and the rest came in a cashier's check delivered by their lawyer. No personal note, no apology, just payment. Calvin moved back into the house, but things were different between us. He slept in the guest room. We barely spoke beyond necessary logistics. He went to work, came home, made dinner, and kept to himself. I could see him struggling with guilt, with shame, with the realization of what he'd almost cost us. 2 weeks after the confrontation, he finally broke the silence. I've been seeing a therapist, he said one evening as we sat in the living room, trying to understand why I let them manipulate me, why I couldn't stand up for you. I looked up from my laptop, and I've realized I've never actually separated from them emotionally. I'm 36 years old, and I'm still seeking their approval like I'm a child. It's pathetic. It's human, I said, surprising myself with the compassion in my voice. But it's also something you need to fix if we're going to move forward. I know. I'm trying. The therapist is helping me set boundaries, understand healthy family dynamics. It's hard, but I'm doing it. For us. For our marriage. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. 6 weeks after everything exploded, the Whitlock family finished moving off the farmland. I drove out to inspect the property the day after their deadline. Mrs. Parker came with me, wanting to see the property she'd heard so much about. The land was empty now. Clean. They'd removed every piece of equipment, every structure, everything they'd built during their tenancy. They'd even filled in the irrigation ditches and reseeded the bare patches. It was more than I'd expected. They did a thorough job, Mrs. Parker observed, walking beside me through the fields. Trying to avoid giving you any reason to sue them further, I imagine. Probably, I agreed. But I appreciate it anyway. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun warm on our shoulders. Finally, Mrs. Parker spoke. What are you going to do with this land? I'm not sure yet. Originally I bought it thinking I'd expand my woodworking business here, build a proper manufacturing facility, hire employees, really grow the company. That sounds wonderful. But now I'm thinking maybe I'll do something different. Maybe lease it to a young farmer, someone just starting out who needs land but can't afford to buy. Help someone build something real, the way my grandfather helped me. Mrs. Parker smiled. Your grandfather would be proud of you, Eleanor. Not just for how you handled this situation, but for the person you've become. Tears pricked my eyes. My grandfather had been the only family member who truly believed in me, who'd left me the inheritance that let me buy my first property. Everything I'd built started with his faith in me. I hope so, I whispered. That evening, I came home to find Calvin in the kitchen, cooking dinner. He'd made my favorite, homemade lasagna, garlic bread, Caesar salad. The table was set with candles. What's this? I asked. An apology dinner. Not the apology. I know I need to do more than cook a meal. But a start. We sat down to dinner, and for the first time in weeks, we actually talked. Really talked. Not about his parents, not about the property, just about us. About our hopes, our fears, our future. I want to rebuild your trust, Calvin said as we finished eating. I know it won't be easy. I know it might take years. But I want to try. If you'll let me. I looked at him across the candlelit table. This man I'd married 5 years ago. This man who'd betrayed me. This man who was now genuinely trying to change. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, I said honestly. What you did, what you let your parents do, that hurt me in ways I'm still processing. I know. But, I continued, I can see you're trying. I can see you're working on yourself. That means something. So you'll give me another chance. I'll give us another chance. But things have to change, Calvin. Really change. Not just now while the guilt is fresh, but permanently. Can you do that? He reached across the table and took my hand. Yes, I can. I will. I promise you, Eleanor, I will spend the rest of my life proving I deserve a second chance. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. Adelaide called Calvin's phone, violating the no-contact agreement, and he immediately hung up and reported it to Charles. He chose me over her for the first time. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. Slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding. Therapy helped. Boundaries helped. Time helped. The trust would never be what it once was. That innocence was gone forever. But maybe we could build something different. Something stronger, forged through hardship rather than assumed through vows. 1 year after the property grab attempt, I was sitting on my front porch with coffee, watching the sunrise, when a car pulled into my driveway. I tensed, but it wasn't Adelaide's Mercedes. It was a beat-up pickup truck. A young man stepped out, maybe mid-20s, holding a piece of paper. Mrs. Whitlock. I'm sorry to show up unannounced. I'm Jake Morrison. I heard you might have farmland available for lease. I smiled, remembering the name. Morrison. The family who'd owned the land before I bought it. You're related to the previous owners. Grandson, he said. My grandparents sold the land when they retired. I've been trying to find a way to get back into farming, but land is so expensive and nobody wants to lease to someone without experience. I gestured for him to sit on the porch. We talked for an hour, about his plans for organic farming, about sustainable agriculture practices, about his dream of building something that would last. He reminded me of myself 8 years ago, full of hope and determination but needing just one chance. The land is yours, I said. Fair lease terms, flexible schedule, and I'll help you get started with equipment contacts. His eyes filled with tears. Are you serious? Completely serious. My grandfather gave me a chance once. Now I'm passing that forward. Jake left with a lease agreement to review and hope in his eyes. I watched him drive away, feeling something settle in my chest. Peace. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. My relationship with Calvin was still a work in progress. I'd probably never speak to his parents again. The betrayal still stung sometimes, catching me off guard. But I'd protected what was mine. I'd stood up for myself. I'd set boundaries and enforced them. And I'd turned something ugly into something good, helping a young farmer achieve his dreams on land that had nearly been stolen from me. Inside the house, Calvin was making breakfast. I could smell coffee and bacon. We had a long road ahead of us still. But for the first time in a year, I felt hopeful about walking it. My in-laws had tried to steal my property, thinking I was too weak or too ignorant to stop them. They'd learned a hard lesson. Never underestimate a woman who built everything she has with her own hands. They'd called me ungrateful, dramatic, unreasonable. But in the end, I was the one still standing in my house, on my land, with my dignity intact. They'd tried a property grab. I'd ended their entire scheme with documents they never saw coming. And somehow, through all the pain and betrayal, I'd found my strength. The strength to stand alone, to defend what was mine, to forgive without forgetting. I picked up my coffee and took a long sip, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. This was my property, my home, my future. And nobody, not my in-laws, not their schemes, not their money or their manipulation, could ever take that away from me. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so strong, so independent, so completely yours that nobody can touch it. And that's exactly what I'd done.